So last night I had a rather terrible night's sleep, and I was laying awake all night, possessed by the spirit of Rampart Rants. And I knew that everyone thought this wasn't going to happen, and you know, maybe I had a little doubt in there myself. But it is going to happen, I assure you. It's happening right now as we speak. Now, with the title Rampart Rants, you could very much believe that it could be about absolutely everything. And that fizzing noise you're hearing is a barocca, so just forget about that for now. You know, there's plenty of things that people could rant about, such as, Donald Trump, Hillary Clinton, Theresa May, Brexit, other wonderful stuff. But today we're going to talk about something much, much more important, and that is Scooby-Doo. Now, over the years, there's been lots of renditions of Scooby-Doo, and none quite capturing the magic of the original. The original was made on a very tight budget, and I think that when studio executives, especially in that one, were forced to be more creative because they didn't have much to go on, and unfortunately, I think everyone who worked on the show afterwards thought a different aspect of the show was what made it what it was, and they never think to combine them all ever again. I'm going to run you down all the versions of Scooby-Doo that came out and talk about them. So, first of all, there's Scooby-Doo, Where Are You? And I think what's crucial about this is that they created a show that was primarily horror first. I mean, if you look at it, it's dark environments, everything's pretty darkly drawn. The only bits of colour tend to be either the villain or the characters themselves. And later shows, some of them will have that aspect of it, but they won't capture the same feel. But specifically because the music used it's impressive at sometimes, but it adds to the tension. It's the first half of any Scooby-Doo episode will be dedicated to trying to scare the pants off you, primarily, and then the lighter-hearted stuff will come later, and that's something that they tend to miss later on. So I'm going to move on to the second show. I've got a big list here. The new Scooby-Doo movies. So the new Scooby-Doo movies would basically just be Scooby-Doo guests. So Don Knotts, just Three Stooges, whoever. And this show's great for different reasons. I mean, it's not really scary in any aspects because it's more a show to show off the guest more than a show to think that they put the mysteries in there, but there's only like one or two episodes that have, decent villains. I mean, the Batman one's particularly good, and I believe there's a Harlem Globetrotters one with pirates. I think that was somewhat scary. But apart from that, nothing really. Oh, there might be one with an exterminator. That was alright. That one has some of the music left over. I should also mention the Scooby-Doo show, because that's... I'll move on to that. So that's more of a side thing, and it's its own thing, and so it's more Scooby-Doo experimenting with styles, and so that's fine. Then we get to Scooby-Doo show and Laugh Olympics. Now, the Scooby-Doo show, I can only imagine had an even smaller budget than the original Scooby-Doo, because it's just riddled with weird cuts and animation issues, and it does have the music of it, but I think it falls flat because this isn't very well constructed. I believe it was meant to be part of another show that was on. I think it was the Dynamo Hour or something. The music in it had changed from the original, and also they'd added in, I don't know, it was just flat out weird, and there were some scary ones in there, the Steaming Demons, but I mean, they didn't have any of the sort of chase segments. The chase segments from the original show didn't have anything like that, and some of the voice acting was off, and it seemed to be very much all done as quickly as possible. And then you have Scooby-Doo All-Star Laugh Olympics, which is another show that's great in its own right. But again, that's just a comedy. There's no mysteries to it. It's just like wacky races. And so at this point, Scooby-Doo's going on. It's still on the rails. I mean, it's mainly budgeting issues and, you know, the show struggling to find its niche here and there because, I mean, the original cartoon only had like 20 odd episodes, and the new Scooby-Doo movie is about the same, I think. And so it's more establishing itself. It isn't until later where we get Scooby and Scrappy-Doo, which is where the makers of the show seem to forget about, like, they forget about Daphne and Fred because they were like, oh, screw these people, we don't need these people. Everyone loves Scooby-Doo because of Velma, Shaggy and Scooby, which, I mean, in the original they'd be the focus of the episode, sure, but to completely admit everyone else is just stupid because everyone, especially Daphne, I think in all the Scooby-Doo popularity polls, Daphne will rank third behind Shaggy and Scooby, and then it'll be Velma or Fred. It tends to change between the two. So why they think Velma would be the one to add, maybe because they can do the gag of her, oh, I've lost my glasses. But the whole Scooby-Doo and Scrappy-Doo thing was, I think, a failure to recognise who their audience was. They're no longer intending to scare people. They've just got, you know, it's meant to be comedy. It's not. It's just completely missing the point. And you've got Scrappy-Doo, which is an annoying character that nobody likes because he's. I mean, I always thought that the Scrappy-Doo is bad. You know, it's been overplayed a bit, but still, he is. What he. At that point, and with his introduction to the show, them changing the cast around with Yabba-Doo and all these things, I mean, those shows don't get reruns anymore. No one wants to watch it. It's just poor television. It's hardly funny. It's just I hope whoever was in charge of that just got fired. And so I'm going to move swiftly past that and on to the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. Now, this one I think was more to regain that horror aspect. It didn't quite have the mystery or, you know, the gang or the music, but it was to focus on real monsters, and I believe at the same time they were doing other stuff, you know, like the Ghoul School and the Boo Brothers, where they try and bring in that supernatural element and have like Scooby-Doo and Shaggy like hang out with Halloween monsters, and that was cool in its own right, but that is just like that's almost a separate universe thing, because in the originals and before that, you know, it was very clearly set that real monsters, I mean, sometimes they put like a real monster sting in some things, like, you know, as they're driving away there'll be, you know, the real one there or something like that. And this show got cancelled, maybe because of Film Plan or someone like that, but the show itself is absolutely fine. I don't tend to have a problem with the 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo. I think it was a pretty decent show, but again, up until this point, nothing's really captured what makes that original show so good. That's why that original show is shown all the time, and you'll be hard-pressed to find any reruns of Scrappy or 13 Ghosts, or, my next one, A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. This was part of the Baby Looney Tunes, Baby Babality, whatever theme that was going on, where they thought, oh, let's see the cast when they were young, even though it makes no sense and it's way less interesting, because I don't know about you, but I always find it more interesting where you have characters who have separate lives who come together at a point in time to become that gang. Not it was said in the stars that they would become a gang when they were like 5 years old, and they've been solving mysteries all this time. That's just dumb, and it makes it really bad. So if you can bear to watch more than 30 seconds of A Pup Named Scooby-Doo, you're welcome to do that. I'm not ever doing that again. Again, this focuses on comedy, and it completely misses the point of Scooby-Doo, and it just, a lot of these shows with the Scrappy-Doo, Pup Named Scooby-Doo and thing, it just screams of executives really, really not understanding what they're making. Which is why Scooby-Doo died out for a certain period of time. And it wasn't until someone self-aware enough to create the best Scooby-Doo rendition, which is, of course, Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island. Which isn't just a great Scooby-Doo film, it's a great film in general. I mean, I'm not talking greatest film of all time, but it was certainly one of the greatest movies of that decade. It was probably the best movie that year. I think it was 97, so, it goes, and they get it right in that one. They set out to scare the audience first. This time with the old Scooby-Doos would focus on scaring people with the music, and they'd also focus on scaring people with the audio, the laughs of the monsters, the knocking, sounds. Very much like how a indie horror game will try and scare people, something akin to Eternal Darkness. It's not Lovecraftian horror, but they have to have that dark side of the show in order to make the light side good, because the contrast which makes it, if you have just a single monotone comedy outlook, you end up with a poor show. But in Zombie Island they get it right, and this time the monsters are real, but they set it in the universe where monsters weren't real. They set it in the times that they've been solving mysteries for a long, long time, and unmasking people, and they search out a real demon, a real supernatural phenomenon. What's also good about this show is that it has the full cast properly, and they add character dynamics to Fred and Daphne, with making Daphne the sort of leader of the group, because she's the most successful and she has her own TV show, and that dynamic is where Scooby-Doo really hit its stride, is because before it would tend to be that Fred would be the leader and he'd sort of make decisions. Let's go over here, let's split up and look for clues, which is maybe why the characters, the executive decided to drop him, because what he did didn't seem that important, and so they were like, well, no one cares for Fred. But the zombie art, people who made Zombieland really understood their market. They understood the product. They made it right. It has the Terror Time Again music. It has actual, scared of the cat ladies. The zombies look at it. It sets out to scare you, and it also has the lighter elements of Scooby-Doo, and it really delivers as a film, so it's well worth watching, even if you're not a Scooby-Doo fan. Of course, they followed this up with a few more movies in this same style. You had Scooby-Doo and the Witch is the Ghost, which is one of my personal favourites because it has Tim Curry in it, and this also delivers on the supernatural element, and I think it delivers on the tone, and the villains are a lot good. It's not quite as complete of a film as a Zombie Island, but it is responsible for the Hex Girls being introduced, which is one of the best additions to Scooby-Doo. And then this was followed up with Alien Invaders and Cyber Chase, and both of these sort of fell into like a formulaic. Space Invaders was probably, I think that was almost jumping the shark with them going for aliens as opposed to, well, they could have done aliens before, but they'd done like ghost aliens. They hadn't done just aliens, and so it has the similar vibe to how Crystal Skull jumped the shark. And so, yeah, and so the films declined in quality a little bit, but they were still better than anything Scooby-Doo had produced in the previous 20 years since the original. The Cyber Chase is also decent, but the structure of it is very strange, and I don't know. It's self-referential in ways, and I feel like for the premise to have worked, it'd need a longer runtime than what it does. Most of the Scooby-Doo films tend to get a runtime of 80 minutes. Maybe that's as long as they can get. So it wasn't really fully fleshed out, and I always think that film is lacking. Sorry, just taking a drink. I may edit this, I may not. And then after this, they decided to just go back to, because at this time the brand had been revived, and so they sort of returned to the old style format instead of continuing with this, which is a decision I will never understand. It's maybe to coincide with my next topic, which is What's New Scooby-Doo. Now, What's New Scooby-Doo is a prime example of the owners not understanding the product at all. What's New Scooby-Doo is, there is no fear in it. Everything is light colours and is bright light colours. There's no real horror. The music is very, it's just stereotypical rubbish. It doesn't really add to the tension. There is no tension. You're very well aware that the cast are all laughing and joking, and there's no. It's just the aesthetics wrong, and they try to capture the magic of having like music in it, and so of course the original music was done by Davy Jones, and that would be sort of a Beatles-esque parody type music. So you'd have 7 days a week as opposed to 8 days a week by the Beatles, and so they thought, well, we'll copy modern day bands, and so they have like Simple Plan and things like that. This show just always falls flat for me. It's just the characters are there, but it doesn't do anything interesting, and it doesn't create any atmosphere. There's no reason to rewatch any of the episodes because it's just silly. Not as silly as the next topic, which is Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. This show, what it does is, well, it commits a worse sin than the other shows, is that some of the other shows had removed Velma and Daphne, Freddy and Daphne. This show removes the whole other, the other three of the cast, and just leaves Shaggy and Scooby-Doo, and this is more of an adventure type show, because you have a villain, and it ends up being like a thwart the villain of the week, so it's more of like a Batfink or a Danger Mouse type show. It's an interesting idea, but it really doesn't work because the animation's poor, and the type of humour that it's going through is poor, and the theme is poor, and the idea, like the premise, the way that they establishes the villain, just Shaggy and Scooby get a villain and a robot, and now they've got to go against Dr. Evil Man thing. It's not worth watching. I wouldn't watch it if I were you. And the less said about it, the better. Now, we come to Scooby-Doo Mystery Incorporated, the closest the TV show has come to recreating. The films has managed to recreate the vibe of the original. This is the closest the TV show has come to. Now, while this also does suffer some of the problems of What's New Scooby-Doo, in that you can't the villains aren't that scary. It does try to adhere to modern trends. The episodic nature of Scooby-Doo is less popular now, especially for adult-themed shows, because you cannot have... people watch things on Netflix, and, shows like Star Trek and shows like, Monster of the Week shows tend to be not so popular because shows like to have that stinger at the end where it's like, find out next week. Worst offender of this that I've watched is Prison Break, where everything is a cliffhanger. There's a cliffhanger at every episode, and it makes an unreasonable amount of crap happen, because it's like everything that could go wrong went wrong, and impossible things are happening, and it's just to create tension when there shouldn't really anyway, because things will just appear out of nowhere. So they have this episodic nature. They have this overarching plot, so that each story is intertwined. It's set as a semi-sequel to the original, because they talk about their past mysteries, and they get some new mysteries. I believe that the biggest misstep with this show was the development of the characters beyond to a Flanderization level. Now, Shaggy and Scooby-Doo can't really be Flanderized because they started out that way. They like food. That's all you really have to adhere. They're funny people who like food. You can't really mess that up. And so they remain relatively intact. However, Fred has become a guy who's obsessed with traps, which it's just taken... you can see the thought process behind it. What did Fred do in the original show? He was the leader, and he always organised the traps. So Fred loves traps. He loves them. He sleeps with a net in his bed. He's the trap collector. He's the trap master. Everyone gives Fred traps for Christmas. Like it's stupid. Right? I always interpreted, Fred's, ability with traps as being, more of like his street smarts, because he is, the strongest member, and he is also the leader, and he's the, I'm not going to say jock, but jock of the gang, and so he has more. He's a man of action. He's more of the Captain Kirk type person. He will, he will fight when he has to fight, run when he has to run. If he has to get a trap, he'll get it done. And so they approach it with just being like, he's so obsessed with traps. He has to have traps. Like every time, Daphne's like, hey, let's go out on a date. He's like, I'd love to, but I just got some traps on eBay, and you'd just be sat there, and it's just stupid. It's just poor writing, and they don't tend to build on it. They just turn him into this. They turn him into a dumber character than Shaggy and Scooby are. Like, in fact, they turn a lot of characters into dumb versions of themselves. Daphne in the show is strange, although she has a lot of problems. Because she changes from show to show. I mean, I'll go on to later about what they've done to her, but this show, it tends to. I know they sound like that she's a member of a family, and her family don't approve of her going out with Fred because he's some weird trap guy, and she likes him despite the fact that he's doesn't acknowledge her existence or anything of that nature. And he actively pursues other women in the show. I feel as though they didn't really know what to do with Daphne in this one. Moving on to Velma and Shaggy. The reason I'm talking about these both at the same time is because they decided, for some ridiculous reason, to have them be in a relationship. And the thought process probably went something, well, we've got two members of the cast, a boy and a girl, but they're not going out, so what we can do is we can make them go out, even though their personalities do not jive at all. There's no reason for them to go out, they have no similar interests, and in every other adaptation of Scooby-Doo, they've actively pursued other people. There's many episodes where Velma gets maybe like a boyfriend in the episode, or someone who fancies her, and they've never shown any interest in her, and the only thing that you could possibly link them is that they get some screen time together, because normally, Fred and Daphne go off, and then Velma, Shaggy and Scooby, that would happen sometimes. But, I mean, the teen drama that this show tries to create just falls flat. They could have done it well. They didn't. I think they were trapped in. They didn't want to make the drama too real, or they didn't want to make it too simple, so they ended up with this like teen Veronica Mars crap drama. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work. The rest of the show is mostly fine, with the mysteries, and the overarching mystery works fairly well. I'd like to have seen this show continued, because it was the best adaptation of Scooby-Doo since the original. It still missed the mark on a number of things, but I think it was 80% of the way there. So at this point, when this show was airing, I thought that Scooby-Doo was on a good track and that they would improve on this season by season. But oh no. No. Birthed out of the steaming wreckage of Teen Titans Go, the most popular show in America, it would seem, more popular than anything you can possibly imagine. So popular that every single show, every single time slot on Cartoon Network is filled with Teen Titans Go, which maybe for another rant. For Teen Titans Go, and they've birthed this show, which is Be Cool Scooby-Doo. I could show you a picture of it, where I could show you how awful the style of it is. I can't believe anybody got paid money to draw those characters. It just makes me angry looking at it. It's just so poor. And I understand if they were wanting to go for a comedy show, but have a slightly different. But it looks awful. It looks god awful. I can't even bear to watch a second of this show. However, persevere I did, and I watched a couple episodes, and they replaced the actress for Velma, which happens fairly often, but most of the actresses sounded sort of similar. Mindy Cohn did a very good job with Scooby-Doo. I think she was the voice for a good 20 years. And they replaced her with Kate Micucci, who is not an actress. She's just not. She just plays herself in everything. It just doesn't sound like Velma, and it's just this monotone, dewy voice that it's just not. It's not Velma, it's Kate Micucci, and maybe she has some star power that I'm not aware of. But I don't see why this choice was made. It was maybe just a desperate attempt to mix things up or make it, more comedy centered. I don't know. In this show, Daphne also has some sort of weird mental problem where she talks with sock puppets and has a gimmick each episode. I'm sure this show is alright for people who like that sort of Teen Titans Go crap, but it's not Scooby-Doo, and it's not worth watching. So that's a rundown of every show, and I think the key elements for them to make a new show is they really have to nail the fact that what they have to do is they have to set out to scare as their first priority. Now, whether you do that with music like it was done in the original show, or whether you do that with almost Lovecraftian horror, or if you do that with or you do that with, I don't know, you could have different settings, or you could have it be psychological horror. That's what the primary thing of the episode should be dedicated to. The characters are there for comic relief and also to make sort of light of the situation, because the Scooby-Doo episodes in the original always start off dark and they get gradually lighter, sometimes lighter than leading to a chase scene where you'd have the happy-lucky music. But the theme of everything is there is dark colours, and whether that be a creative decision or a money decision, the environment in those Scooby-Doos are oppressive, and the contrast there is what makes that show fantastic. And they have good character design, good sound design. Everything hit the right notes, and executives see different things. They try and recreate just the comedy elements. So they have comedy shows, they create the horror element, they just have horror shows. Only one or two, only Scooby-Doo Zombie Island and that series of films managed to create that. In the later films, which are just coming out every year now that have crossovers, it tends to be, that Fred liking traps thing has leaked into that, so we have Fred's the trap guy. Velma's just like, Velma's just too nerdy, and maybe they'll do a love interest. Shaggy and Scooby do their own thing and have food, and Daphne dresses up in costumes and looks hot for the audience. I think Scooby-Doo at the moment is lost at sea, and there is a Scooby-Doo movie live action. Maybe that'll save it. I will happily work on Scooby-Doo. Hanna-Barbera or Warner Brothers, if you're listening, I will happily fix this show for you and give you a TV show that's popular and recreates the themes and the excitement of, and you've probably made an absolute bomb from syndication of that original show, but you can't pay people to show the other renditions of Scooby-Doo because no one wants to watch them. No one wants to watch What's New Scooby-Doo. No one wants to watch Shaggy and Scooby-Doo Get a Clue. No one wants to watch Scooby and Scrappy-Doo. No one wants to watch A Pup Named Scooby-Doo. I would like to watch 13 Ghosts of Scooby-Doo, but you never finished it, so you won't show it because it's just an open-ended ending. If you'd actually finished it, it'd be worth re-airing. Laugh Olympics and Scooby-Doo movies have their place, but that's more. You'd have to be showing other Scooby-Doo things. Mystery Incorporated, people want to see, but you have to see that. You can't just air episodes out of order. You have to air them in order, which is maybe something that a cartoon doesn't. I'm pretty sure they air Teen Titans Go in any order whatsoever. So maybe that's not an attraction for those type of networks. And maybe that's what Be Cool Scooby-Doo was created for. You have failed to. You were given this lump of gold created from this shoestring budget, and you've managed to mess it up. And I hope that it can get back on the tracks because, Scooby-Doo means a lot to me. I'm sure it means a lot to other people. And I hate to see it just being treated as though it's like. Treated as though it's, it's treated like, almost, I can't even think of something, Sonic. Sonic has had some awful adaptations, and I feel that, Scooby-Doo fans have been put through the ringer just as much as those Sonic fans have. We don't deserve this, it's plain as day to see from anyone who's not an executive how to fix Scooby-Doo, and selling the brand off to like Halifax to advertise banking, and it's beggars belief how you could be given something so influential and just fail to understand your markets, fail to understand the audience, fail to understand why people like the show repeatedly for 50 years. 1969 was when Scooby-Doo came out. Not since then has anyone understood why it was successful when they were working on it, apart from the team that worked on Zombie Island, which was still 30 years later. I wish everyone all the good. This has been Rampart Rants. I'm sure I could talk about this for a longer time, but I'm doing this all in one cut. If I talk anymore, I'm just going to collapse. Scooby-Doo needs to be fixed. It's at sea at the moment. I'll see you another time. Goodbye.